Welcome to this guide to your primary English workbook. This video is going to cover the kind of main sections of the workbook and how to use it, but there's a lot more information than I can cover in one video. So if we see here from the contents page, we've put a load of different things in here in the guide. It's a whole section to itself. I'd really encourage you download a copy from the website, or you'll get a hard copy at your first session and read through in detail those sections to make sure you're comfortable with how to use this workbook best so that you and the pupils can get the most from it. If I just skip to one of those sections here, how the workbook is set out is one of the most important pages you can have a look through. And it talks about the kind of structure of the book. So there's introductory sessions to start with, and then we've split it into themes. So one of the main changes we've made to this workbook is to try and build up the skills slowly. So we focus on a specific skill to start with each week, and then as you go through the themes, it will start with define and retrieve, and then it will kind of build up more slowly to a mix of skills. So later on, we'll have a whole range of skills together. And the reason to build up it slightly more slowly is to make sure that pupils, one, are confident in the skill that they are working on, but two, that it's clear what are they doing in that session, because I think it's slightly more tricky with English and maths to be really specific about the skill that you're building, and for pupils to feel like that they've developed in a skill. So for all those reasons, it is really important that you work through the workbook in chronological order, and rather than allowing pupils to pick a different theme each week. The rest of this video, I'm going to look at this session plan and kind of take you to various parts of the workbook and how they link up. But I won't go through in all this detail because the workbook is there for you to have a look at. Obviously, this is an example session plan. We've done it for an hour session. Your session, you might work with two groups of pupils within your tutoring session, so you might need to adjust those timings to make it work. It is important to have a session plan, and it is important to plan for your sessions. It shouldn't take a lot of time, but even 15-20 minutes planning makes a big difference to the quality of the session and how much pupils can get out of it. So even if you know which pages are you going to use, that you've had a look at the extract and the questions, make sure you're confident with how you're going to support pupils in answering it. So that one of the difficult things in English is sometimes we're so keen for them to get the answer, we can almost lead them too much and tell them too much. So it's really good to reflect on and say, how am I going to not tell them what to do, but support them in building their skills, in building their comprehension skills. So one important thing to mention this, I've mentioned comprehension as a skill we're focusing on. In the SATs, they will sit a spelling test and a spelling, punctuation and grammar paper, and we're focusing on the reading paper. The reason for that being it's quite difficult in a class of 30 or more pupils to do comprehension in a way that everyone can be engaged and to differentiate it to the level that everyone is at. So it's an activity that works really well in a tutoring session. So let's get on. So the first bit we've talked about is reading for pleasure activity. And this is a little bit different, something we've brought in new. And if I flick to the guidance for that, you can say part of the reason for this is being based in research. You know, developing a love of reading is really important for long-term outcomes for pupils. And we think, although obviously the SATs are really important in their own way, and building comprehension skills are really important, we don't want to completely destroy reading for any sense other than a comprehension exercise. So I think it's important for the pupils to see you being interested in reading and why you like reading, what is good about it. And it's also useful for you to learn about the pupils as well and see what they're interested in. So we've put some guidance there for you to how to structure that part of the session. It's only 10 minutes, and I would use that 10 minutes kind of strictly speaking from the session time and 10 minutes in. So if one pupil is a little bit late, I just get started with the reading for pleasure activity and then move on to the extract after that. So the next bit is about reading the extract. And again, things like this, it sounds really simple when you say it. Just read the next extract. Okay, absolutely fine. But you can see we've put some guidance in here. How do I read the extract? Because there's lots of different ways in which you could read an extract. And we've put some suggestions here of ways to do that depending on whether your pupils have similar ability, if one is stronger than the other, or things like that. So having a look at the extracts in the workbook. And then here is that focus on the comprehension questions. So this talks about kind of scaffolding. So give it, like I say, it's not that we don't want to give them support, but you also want to be careful not to kind of give them too much support and make sure that they are able to answer questions independently. So you can see here I always put something about how can I help pupils find answers quickly, because that's a really key skill from in their comprehension is to kind of get a sense of a text quickly, to be able to read through quickly. We've had teachers tell us that as one of the big challenges pupils face is kind of a stamina with the length of texts and doing things quickly. And some schools have a big focus on that. You might hear pupils telling about different things they do in their lessons for that. But what I want to show you is the two kind of types of sessions we've got. So the first one is these kind of skills, specific skills that you'll start on, and then moving on to a theme. So if we go to a skill session, so this is the first one here. It's the retrieve skill. This detail here is taken from the SATs. It's kind of very specifically what is that skill. On the right hand side you'll see this kind of ladder, and that's a support. So it's about, we can't tell pupils exactly what the question is going to be like. The text they get is going to be different each time. They wouldn't have seen it before. So what we need to do is give them a kind of system of how do I, if it's a retrieval question, how do I answer that type of question? What's my method for approaching these types of questions? So you can see that ladder there is something that we'd recommend you come back to if pupils aren't sure. Go back to that and give them a kind of step-by-step way to structure having a go at those questions. Here we've put some examples of what that might look like in the SATs paper, and down at the bottom here, examples of retrieval question stems. So that's an opportunity to help pupils build confidence in recognising those questions, because that's going to be another skill as well, is for them to be able to tell, is this a retrieval question, is it for defining, is it summarising, and then know, okay, it's retrieval, so that means I can go through these steps here. And then here it's just asking how you feel about the retrieval questions for the pupils. So this is really just a sense of, okay, this is the first skill we're looking at. What do we mean by it? What does it look like? How confident do you already feel about it? And just kind of going through it with your pupils. You've then got an extract, like we've talked about before. At the start of the extract, we've put a few questions for you to discuss with your pupils. Here's an introduction to the text, which is important to read, and the actual text itself. And then we've gone into some comprehension questions. So this will become quite familiar to you. Work with your tutor at the start, so you can give them a lot of support, kind of take them through the different steps. What do they need to do? Now they're working with their partner, so working with the other pupils in their group, and then working independently. And that's really important that we have that in mind, that we do need them to get to a point where they can be confident doing this by themselves. So that structure will become quite familiar to you. And then we've got a challenge part. So here are the challenges for them to write their own retrieval question. And then we've got another reflection. So as they rated when they started this work on this skill, how do you find retrieval questions? We've now put that in again. And hopefully they will feel a bit more confident. But obviously it's important that they're honest about that. So don't panic if they're still finding it difficult. That just means that, you know, there's a bit more work that you can do on it with them, and trying to work out what is it that they're finding difficult about it would be really helpful. So that's a specific skill. Now let's have a look at a theme. So this theme is journeys. You can see it's set out relatively similarly. We can see here some questions for you to talk about with your pupils, a bit of an introduction to the text. This is a bit further on in the workbook, so the text is slightly longer. And as I said, part of this is to build up pupils' stamina with the lengths of text that they will find in their SATs. Teachers have said that quite a lot to us as well, that that's important for them to build up that skill. And now you can see at the top, we've got a whole range of different skills going on. So we've got the retrieve that we had before, but there's also define, infer, summarize, and predict. And the reason for that mix as we're building up through the workbook is just to get them confident switching between question types. And you can see against each question what type it is, and that allows them to go back and use the skill ladder if they're confused. But it gives a real mix, not just of question, the skill you're looking at, but also how that question's being asked. So what does it look like on the page? Are you ticking your box? Are you matching? Are you circling? Do you need to write something? And that's important as well, to make sure that pupils are reading the question carefully and it sounds simple again, but answering what is the question actually asked you, and are you answering it properly? So here's a good example of based on what you've read, do you think it will make the journey better? They have to tick a box, but then they have to back it up as well. And then again, we've got a challenge bit here, which, don't panic if your pupils don't get onto the challenge bit, but can be a nice way of having a little bit extra if a pupil's gone a bit more quickly than another. And also these activities often will help you learn a little bit more about your pupils as well. So if I flip back to our session plan and see where we've got to, so this is the kind of main part of our session. This is where we want to spend the most time on those comprehension questions. I've mentioned that challenge activity there. And this again links back to the enjoyment of reading. It's not just pure comprehension. It allows them to be a bit more creative and imaginative, and that's something that we want to encourage as well. And then we've talked about the end of the session here. And it's really important that you wrap up the session nicely, that you reflect on what the pupils done in the session, what is the skill you've been focusing on. If somebody asked your pupils, what did you do in tutoring today, have a think about what their answer would be. And we've given some suggestions here. So if you've maybe finished a bit early, rather than going on to the next extract, which can be difficult to pick up and a bit messy and all of that, we'd encourage a little bit of a focus on building vocabulary. And again, we've put in a section on that. You can see here, because again, how do you build vocabulary can sound simple, but might be more complicated. So we've put some activities in here that can help you do that. The pupils in their workbook have a word journal, so they can write down in there and keep a track of the different vocabulary they're building. And they also have a English passport, we've called it. So if I flip back to this contents page, for each of their themes, they'll have a space where they can kind of tick off or stamp when they've completed all the text from those themes. Like I say, you'll be working through those in order. So that's a bit of a whistle-top tour. Whistle, say that quickly 3 times, around our primary tutor English workbook. We hope you found that useful. Please ask us if you've got more questions. Please do have a look on the website, download it, read through all the information in there. It's really valuable. And thank you so much for giving up your time and supporting the young people we work with. We hope you really enjoy tutoring English with us.